Hello and good afternoon, and a very warm welcome to the second of a two-part series we're hosting in conjunction with Farmers Weekly. This afternoon, it's all about SFI and everything you need to know about it. Today, I'm joined by my colleagues at Lawrence School Partnership, kicking off with Keith Ledington-Hill, who's the Managing Director here, who will provide you with an overview of the agricultural transition. David Winard with an SFI overview as it stands and updates going into 24. And Charles Baines, who will take you through a live application on the RPA portal of what an application will actually look like. If you have any questions, I know we've had plenty through already. The Q&A box is located at the left of your screen. So if you have any questions as our speakers are talking, then please do put them in there. We will be running a poll in between speakers, so it will be greatly appreciated if you answer those and take a few minutes to do that. This webinar is recorded and is available on demand. So if you miss anything, you can catch it back after this webinar has concluded. I shall hand you over to Keith to go through the agricultural transition.
Good evening. Thank you, Marcus. Marcus Wing is actually hosting this event for us this evening. Just a little bit of a background on Lawrence School. We've been going for over 6 years. In fact, we started back in 1960. We have a number of offices across the country, as marked on the map. Burgess Hill, for those who don't know, is in Sussex. We have offices in Scotland, in Dunfermline and Melrose, and offices in Newmarket and Yeovil. We've been appointed underneath the Future Farm Resilience Scheme by DEFRA to deliver the service. And under this service, what we're delivering is webinars, of which this is one. We've actually done a series last autumn. We've done a couple with Farmers Weekly, one on carbon auditing last week, and this one tonight on SFI. We'll also be doing a series of webinars again this coming autumn. So if you want to sign up for us, please let us know, and we'll invite you along to those webinars. Also under this scheme, we're doing one-to-one farm visits. Under the scheme, we actually do up to 3 visits per farmer. These are free. The first visit involves a sort of a bit of a review of your business, and we pick up on specific topics depending on what's affecting those businesses now and in the future. And we're doing a whole range of carbon audits for farmers underneath the scheme, again, free of charge. The feedback we've had from people who've been involved has been very good so far. So that's what we're offering underneath the scheme. Just talk a little bit about the agricultural transition support. For those you're obviously receiving basic payment scheme payments, obviously you've seen how those are reduced, and that's the green line on this graph. So it's going to be phased out by the end of 2027. Where's that money going? Well, it's going on environmental animal welfare schemes, and you've seen the whole range of new schemes that have been introduced. And obviously, there's opportunities underneath SFI, which is funded underneath the red line, which is increasing as time goes on. Underneath the orange line, there's specific grants for improving farm prosperity, which I'll go through on the next slide. Okay, underneath the Farm Prosperity Scheme, there's a number of things. One is the Farm Equipment Transformation Fund at the top. This is very much the small grant aid scheme. It's been opened a couple of times. It actually has been well subscribed. The success rate for those applying is very high. It is competitive at the end of the day. You can actually get a range of grants between £1,000 and £50,000 now. There is a list of items you can actually get grant aid on, and that covers the whole spectrum of both agriculture and horticulture. When you look at the list, there might be nothing on the list that actually is applicable to you at that time. The list does develop over time, but it's very much a very straightforward single phase grant scheme. More complicated ones under Improving Farm Productivity Scheme. Here the grant again is at a 50% rate. Grants can be obtained between 25 and 50%. There is a minimum spend of 50,000 and a maximum spend of £1 million. Again, this scheme actually is now live. It's a 2-stage application process, and the closing date for the expression of interest stage is the 21st of March 2024. Okay, so you've got 3 or 4 weeks within which to make an application. This is more about increasing added value actually in the farm productivity stage of businesses rather than post-harvest. The other scheme that's alive at the moment is the solar scheme. It's offering 25% grant aid. Again, the grant rate is between £50,000 and £100,000, provided you spend between 60 and 400. Minimum spend is £60,000 for this specific scheme. It is open, it's live. It is a two-stage process. The expression of interest stage, which is the first stage, is again open to the 21st of March. So for those of you considering investing in solar, this is an ideal opportunity to get some grant aid support for any projects that you might happen to have on your own farm. Again, the minimum spend is 60,000. The Summit grant, specifically obviously for livestock farmers, again, this is just closed. It's a three-stage scheme. It is a bit of a postcode lottery here, depending where you are in the country, but the grant rate is 50%, and again, between 25 and 250,000 pounds worth of grant aid. So good opportunities for those livestock farmers who need to increase their slurry storage capacity on their farms. The other scheme is the water management scheme. We've done quite a lot of reservoir applications. Again, this is between 35,000 and £500,000 worth of grant aid. It's closed at the moment. We've had 2 rounds now. I think there'll be another round probably within the next 12 months. It's a question of keeping an eye to the ground to see when it's open. And the last one on the list is the added value one. This is very much post-harvest added value. Typical things would be pack house, processing equipment, grading equipment, that type of thing. Again, the grant aid there is between 25 and 300,000 for spend between 62.5 and 750. That should be open in 2024 for the second round of applications. Again, it's 2-stage. Very important you get your expression of interest in on that, so you're actually in the scheme. So those are the range of grants that are available at the moment, and obviously well worthwhile taking advantage of for those that it's applicable for. Just to talk about the Sustainable Farming Incentive Scheme, which is what our presentation is this evening. So far to date, there's been over 10,000 farmers in England that have applied for SFI since September, so that's probably about 1 in 8 farmers. In terms of the areas covered, on the slides, 174,000 hectares of arable land is now being managed without insecticides, which obviously is one of the key things underneath SFI. Quite a lot of grassland in there, and also quite a lot of hedgerows, 15,000 kilometres. You will notice there's been increased payment rates as of 2024, and obviously Rishi Sunak at the NFU conference a couple of weeks ago announced a doubling in the sort of management payment underneath that scheme. So good opportunities under SFI, and I won't steal the thunder of my fellow speakers who are going to take you through the greater detail. So hope you enjoy the webinar. Thank you very much for joining us this evening, and we'll speak to you later. Thank you.
Thank you, Keith. As Keith explains, I will be going through the Sustainable Farming Incentive. I don't know, hopefully you can all see that.
Yeah.
So primarily going through the Sustainable Farming Incentive, but just to start with, if we review the schemes that are ongoing at the moment in terms of environmental schemes. So first of all, there's the old environmental stewardship schemes, which are HLS schemes that have been renewed, and some of those have now been going for about 20 years. There are countryside stewardship schemes, got both mid-tier schemes and higher tier schemes. And obviously, up until now, there have been a lot more options available under the stewardship scheme than under Sustainable Farming Incentive. You've got countryside stewardship capital scheme. That's open at the moment. It's open all year round, and a lot of people taking advantage of that for things like fencing, hedging, tracks, and so on. And so far, there have been 2 rounds of the sort of big picture, long-term land use change, which they call landscape recovery. Sustainable Farming Incentive pilot scheme agreements, obviously they're all coming to an end. That was the very early stage of SFI. And then you've got this SFI 22 agreements. These are the soils-based agreements, which people took out starting in 2022. So they're either coming to an end, the RPA should have notified you when they come to an end, or they've been ended voluntarily in order to go into SFI 2023. And then we come on to SFI 2023, which is the current version of SFI. So that opened late in 2023 and that's the one that's open for applications at the moment, and that everybody is currently either applying for or looking to apply for. Important point to note is even if you're in a stewardship or HLS scheme, then you can still claim SFI payments on the land. Not for all actions. There's a sort of table of compatibility for each SFI action, which tells you whether it's compatible with certain CS and HLS options. But some actions you can claim across all land, even if it's in stewardship, such as the soils management payment. So it is possible to have both. And then upcoming, so this summer 2024, they're calling this one the Combined Environmental Land Management Offer. And it's going to be a mix of CS mid-tier and SFI actions. So some will be 3-year actions, some will be 5-year actions, and some might even be up to 10-year actions. So you'll end up with a mixed agreement, which has some mid-tier things in it and some SFI things in it, to make the best use of everything for your farm. And then separate to that will be the higher tier scheme. So this year, that won't be a spring application date. That will apparently be in the summer as well. So it's all change. In fact, I think RPA say it's the biggest change for about 70 years in farm subsidies. So I think we all have to bear with them while they try and work their way through it. So just starting with the SFI 2023. So the first point at the top really is that if you're in an SFI 22 agreement, you should already been notified about when it officially ends. You can finish it early if you want to go into SFI 23, but you can only do that on the end of a quarter date. And you've got to let them know in advance that you want to finish it early. If you don't, so if you miss that quarterly notification date by even 1 day, you would be delayed by 3 months in starting your SFI 23. So that's quite an important point to note. The right-hand column on this table, that shows where there's an equivalent or similar stewardship option that's in that right-hand column. So some of them, there is no equivalent in stewardship, and some of them there is. So if I just running very briefly through these options. So the first one, the SAM 1, assessing the soil, testing organic matter, and a management plan. So all farmers should be able to get that on all of their farming land. SAM 2, the multi-species winter cover crops, very popular if people are growing spring crops and they're happy to grow a winter cover crop before it. That's a very popular action. SAM 3, herbal lays, extremely popular on livestock farms. It's a way you can still use the land, you can still graze it, you can still cut it. You've got to have a mix of legumes, herbs and grasses, but it will give it a decent payment. So it's one of those where you can still farm the land and pick up a decent payment. When we come to hedgerows, there's 3 different actions for that. First one is just assessing and recording the condition. Second one, managing the hedgerows. That's where you let it grow out incrementally or cut once every 2 years. And then the third one, if you agree to establish or maintain hedgerow trees at least 1 per 100 metres. And with the new rates, which increased on 1st Jan 24, that means on certain hedges you could pick up to £46 per 100 metres, putting all those 3 together. In terms of the moorland standard, there's only really been one so far, which is the assessing and producing a written record. There's more coming up on moorland in the 24 version, some new actions coming up there. Integrated pest management, so all farms can get the IPM1. So by producing a plan, you pick up £1,129 per year. Got to be signed off by a basis qualified advisor. IPM2 is quite a popular one, so that's particularly where you're looking to take blocks out for more than a year. That's a very popular option, and again, payment rate just gone up for that. Companion cropping, not as common, but can fit in very well. For example, if you sow buckwheat in an oilseed rape crop to help control the beetle, then that's an option there that you can actually get paid for. And then, as Keith mentioned earlier on, the IPM4, the no use of insecticide, that's extremely popular either on farms where they're not using insecticide across the board, or more commonly on farms where individual crops don't need insecticides, such as spring barley, spring oats in the rotation. So it's one you can alter year by year, as you can with all rotational options, depending on what area of spring crops you're growing in that year. In terms of nutrient management, so similar to the IPM1, you get a payment for producing a nutrient management plan of £52 per year. And again, it has to be signed off by a FACTS qualified advisor. Legumes on improved grassland, is one where if you can't meet the SAM 3, the herbal lay criteria, but you've got some legumes in the land, then you can pick that payment up and still manage it more or less as per normal. NUM 3 is probably the most popular of the nutrient management, the legume fallow. So quite a lot of farms are using that as part of their rotation, replacing things like low gross margin spring beans and often orchard rape. So hopefully it'll put some good nutrition into the following wheat crop and help to control blackgrass. And I say avoid those low margin break crops. AHL1, the pollen nectar mix, reasonably popular, but not as popular as the flower-rich grass mixes. Winter bird food is a very popular one, more commonly in blocks rather than whole fields, but you can do it in whole fields or even across a large area. But that's a popular one. Not had too many people taking out the HL3, the grassy fields, corners and blocks, but again, that's appropriate in some situations where people have got awkward corners and areas. And then buffer strips, always very popular. The only thing to remember with that is you mustn't put too much vehicle traffic onto it and create ruts and so on, otherwise you could be in trouble on inspection. In terms of improved grasslands, so we've got field corners, not so popular. Winter bird food on improved grasslands, this is where you walk away from it in the summer, let it go to seed in the autumn, and then leave that seed for the birds over the winter. So it's quite popular if people aren't using their land with great intensity and don't mind doing nothing with it over the late summer, autumn. But on a lot of farms, it's just doesn't really work for their system, because obviously they want to graze it throughout the autumn and even winter. And then finishing with low input grasslands, so same payment rate whether you're inside or outside the SDA. So that's obviously extremely popular where people are already not putting much fertilizer on and not doing a lot of inputs onto the land. Then that's a very popular option there. As Keith said, they've increased the maximum SFI management payment, but I haven't seen anywhere whether that's going to be an increased rate per hectare or just that you can get a same payment per hectare, but on more hectares to get to your maximum £2,000. And for anybody with common land, if there's a group of 2 or more of you, you can apply for a supplement on SFI on common land. So that's a whistle-stop tour of what's there at the moment for SFI 23. Just a few differences. So those are used to stewardship. So with SFI, and I presume the new land management offer, so the agreement length 3 years rather than 5 years. Application date for SFI, it's rolling month by month. For stewardship, it's always been just once a year. And same with start dates. SFI, as soon as you're approved, you can start it whichever month it is. Stewardship has always been 1st of January. In terms of it, if you've got a tenancy that's shorter than the length of the agreement for stewardship, you have to get a written approval from the landlord. Under SFI, you don't have to, providing you've got reasonable expectation of having that land for at least the 3 years. Can the landlord claim? So for CS, yes, if they can demonstrate enough control. For SFI, only tenants or the landowner themselves, if there's no tenancy on it, can make the claim. And then payments for SFI, quarterly, for stewardship, annual. So quite a few differences there for those who've only been used to CS and not SFI. So just some pointers really. Obviously, Charles is going to run through an actual application, some pointers on the applying for SFI 23. First thing is, if you get all the relevant booklets and information, in particular the SFI 23 handbook and the How to Do Actions guidance. I think Chelsea is publishing and will email the links to that information. Very important one, check the land cover rather than land use on the Rural Payment Service and change it where you need to. So quite often, although you may have had arable land use, it can often leave the land cover as permanent pasture, in which case it won't show as being available for arable options. So that's one of your first ports of call, is check your land cover. Request your SFI heifer. Again, I think Chelsea's sending around the link to for the website for that. And the key thing with that is look out for features that could be problematic. So, for example, herbal lays, you need to be careful. If you've got shallow features of interest, then sometimes it suggests you shouldn't be able to get those sort of things, but sometimes you can override that with a conversation with the county archaeology officer. Check for triple SIs on the magic maps, and if you need to get consent or confirmation that anything you're doing is fine from Natural England. Something really important, if you've got potential high value use of the land, such as land that could go for housing, or perhaps land you might look to get biodiversity offsetting on, then just be wary of putting it into an option that might mean it's it affects that potential to get that high value. I mean, decide what your objectives for the scheme are. Is it purely financial? Is it cash flow? Reduce workload and stress, or environmental? I mean, often it's a combination of those, but just be sure what you're looking to get from the scheme. Again, a sort of sit back and consider. And then if there are any major changes, such as environmental actions exceeding land and the farming actions, then you would need obviously to take tax advice before making sort of major changes. Improved grassland, so quite a few of the options, if it's on grassland, it has to be improved grassland. There's a definition on page 112 of that, of the booklet, so make sure you understand that and you're satisfied that your grassland is improved if you're going for one of those options. If something's new to you, obviously discuss it with anybody that you can, so your agronomists, neighbours, other farmers, and obviously a lot more information will become available over time as to how the options are working and how you can best meet the objectives. If you're doing a large area of something, make sure that you've got seed availability, and also is there a contractor? If you're looking to do it with a contractor, will there be a contractor available at the right times to carry out the work? Important thing with the rotational options, so you've got to have at least 50% of the area that you put in year one in years 2 and 3. So you just need to think ahead on the cropping and check that whatever you're entering in year 1, you can do at least half of that in years 2 and 3. I had all sorts of fun doing 3-year cropping plans for people to make sure that that can work out. This point's really important. Increasingly, the inspections are an email asking for evidence. So you need to keep records, invoices, sowing dates and rates, conditions, anything to prove that you've done what you should have done, and in particular photographs and even videos. And I always say, particularly if something looks good at a certain time, take a picture at that time to have as evidence that what you said you were going to do, you actually did, and the action was achieved. So in terms of the new scheme, this Future Combined Environmental Land Management offer, so all we know is it's going to be available sometime in 24. I mean, my suspicion is it'll be an initial rollout to a few people, and then slowly will be increased over time. And as we've already said, it will allow a single application to cover both SFI and mid-tier CS actions. So it's 29 existing of 3 years. 16 more to be added, and RPO are hoping to convert another 41 current 5-year actions into 3-year actions. Not a huge amount of detail at the moment. The best thing, the best reference is the technical annex. on it. And again, I think Chelsea is sending the link for that, so you can look. It's quite a big document. There's lots and lots of pages of options. Not a huge amount of detail, but just a brief sentence on what each option is. And quite a lot of those are brand new. Some of them are sort of reworked existing stewardship options, and some are brand new. In terms of, I won't read all these out, but just to illustrate, there's a lot of categories under this new scheme. Some new ones such as no-till farming, precision farming, and some sort of reworked existing ones. So you've got all the ones there, and again, a whole load of new ones. Agroforestry, I think, is new, and others are sort of would include reworked CS options and new options as well. So a huge amount going on there. Again, you need to refer to the booklet to fully understand what's in each of those. I've just picked out a few notable ones. So no-till farming is going to be of huge interest. Precision farming, again, is going to be of huge interest. Much higher payments for species-rich floodplain meadows and priority habitat species-rich grassland. They're sort of premium payments because they see huge environmental value in those. There's going to be both moorland, upland peat and lowland peat payments. And lowland peat in particular is going to get some quite high rates of payments. All sorts on woodland and trees, agroforestry boundaries. These, again, all going to be of huge interest to quite a few people. Water bodies, quite a few payments there, particularly where they're combating flood and drought resilience. Educational access, that's already available under stewardship, so that's going to be more widely available. We're hoping as a shorter term thing as well. So that's 353, and at the moment the limit is 25 visits per year. And then there's going to be various permissive access actions. So trying to draw it all together into a summary. So we reckon everybody should be claiming under SFI, even if it's just actions that don't affect the way your land is farmed. So all the management payments, the soil payment, and the overall application management payment will give you some money. There's no right or wrong mix or amount. It's going to vary depending on your objectives and your farm. I mean, inevitably, the poorer land, more of that will go into SFI than on better land. You can certainly get to the stage where you exceed your 2020 BPS per hectare, but there will be costs. So you've got seed costs, contract costs, and obviously opportunity costs of either crop gross margin lost or lower output. As I said earlier, do sit back and think about higher value areas and whether it's the right thing to put those into environmental schemes. Check your land cover, get your heifer, check for triple SIs, and check any relevant status on magic maps, such as the priority habitat inventory layers. Check if you've got an option that has to go on to improve grassland, check the definition and make sure you meet it for those parcels. Seek tax advice for any major changes. It's going to be a constant bombardment of new information, so just keep your eye open for anything that comes out. So when the time comes to apply or add actions, you're fully aware of what they all involve. And there will be a process for transferring existing agreements, we're told. I don't know when that's going to be. And the thing to watch out for there is this word equivalence, where they say sometimes you will have to show that your new agreement will have the equivalent environmental value of your old agreements. So that's just one to be aware of. But again, we'll know a lot more about that as the year goes on. Just on terms of other payments, be aware of things like water companies offering payments for fallow, cover and so on. And then capital items, so countryside stewardship capital scheme ongoing. Only thing to note there is some options such as fencing, they have to be to protect water or new environmental features. So hope you took some of that in. I think the slides will be available, and obviously we have got questions at the end. So thank you very much for bearing with me on that. I'm now going to hand over to Marcus, who I think has a poll. So if you could kindly take a few minutes to look through that and answer it, would be very grateful. Thank you very much.
Thank you, David. Yeah, there's certainly a lot there, isn't there? And particularly as the SFI evolves through 2024. Yeah, I can see we've got plenty of questions coming in already. So yeah, that's great to see. If you do have anything that David's just spoke about, then do put it in the Q&A box. And we'll just quickly go through a couple of polls now. So the first poll, have you or will you apply for the Sustainable Farming Incentive? Just a quick yes or no on that one. So that's whether you have applied for an agreement or are looking to apply for agreement. Perfect. Second poll, are you replacing any break crops with rotational SFI actions? Again, just a yes or no on that one. And finally, would you like more info or assistance with SFI? Obviously, Dave's gone through a lot of information there. So again, just a quick yes or no. Excellent. Thank you very much for that. So David's given you a run through of options there. Again, will vary massively on a case-by-case basis. But what do you do once you've got all that prepared? You know exactly what you want to put in. How does that then transfer into putting that as an application, which Charles will take you through now.
Good afternoon. Yes, I'm Charles Baines in the Newmarket office. So, just share my screen. Marcus, I'm just checking with you that you can see that.
Yep.
We're going to look at the sort of practicalities of the SFI, not actually going out into the field and watching things grow, but actually taking you through a live application raises some of the issues to consider and some of the conflicts, some of the traps, some of the opportunities that are in the scheme. This is a live application. It's a real farm. Hopefully you won't be able to see who it is. I've come straight onto the application screen, but where you come into this is you go to your homepage on your RPA portal and click the Sustainable Farming Incentive blue link. 9 out of 10 times that doesn't take you anywhere, and you need to scroll down the middle column of links to get to the Sustainable Farming Incentive again and click that, and then that should take you to the application screen. And there it's quite clear how you raise an application, and you should end up something looking like this: apply for SFI. So to start off with, top left in part 1, you've got some introductory questions. So we'll go to the first one, and that's to check and confirm that your land details are up to date, which in this case they are. If they're not, you do need to get them sorted, whether it's the land cover isn't quite right, or you're changing boundaries or merging fields, etc. And by the way, you can do this this can now be done online under request rural land changes, which is near the change land use links on your RPA portal. And it's a much slicker way of doing it than submitting an RLE1 form. You can upload a map with the changes you want to make, send it to the RPA, and they'll almost automatically log that as a task. It won't get dealt with necessarily straight away, but it'll be quicker than processing paper or email RLE1. So that needs to be done first because they don't want any changes to land covers or areas during the 3 years of the scheme. So in this instance, the maps are up to date, so we're going to continue. So that's the first bit done. And then the next link down is confirm you're eligible to apply. Now, as you've heard from David, you need to have management control for the 3 years of the agreement. In this instance, we do. So I'm going to tick that. If you've only got a 1 year fixed term tenancy and you know you're going to lose the field, don't include it in the application. I think most applications will ask you about the historic environment, farm environment record, or known as a heifer, not a cow. It's actually something to do with historic environment. And if in doubt, just tick yes, because all it requires you to do is to go follow this link in the middle of the page, which will take you to the Historic England heifer page, where you need to request, as it says in the middle of the screen, an SFI heifer, not a CSS heifer or an HLS heifer, but an SFI heifer. And you'll receive that by email, or you can download it off the that website directly once it's been processed. And you can see if you've got any particular features that need to be recognised or considered when you're making your application. For example, herbal lays will not be eligible on, say, a field which has got loads of tumuli on it, because of the perception that the rooting will damage the archaeology underneath. So it does need checking over. This particular farm does have some scheduled monuments, which we'll come to at some stage. So in this instance, we have requested our heifer. So click continue. Now, this farm also borders a triple SI. It doesn't actually have a triple SI on it, but it borders a triple SI, and the mapping is such that it slightly overlaps at the edges. So in this instance, we get asked about triple SIs. And again, if in doubt, unless you're just doing these desk-based options at the bottom, which are the SAM1, IPM1, NUM1, just tick yes. And then you need to go onto the government website and get the notice of proposed operations on triple SIs, which is a form you need to fill in to say what you are or aren't doing on that particular feature or next to that feature. Now, in this instance, I'm going to have to do one, and I can absolutely guarantee it will come back from Natural England in a week or two's time saying, actually, it's just overzealous mapping. You haven't actually got triple SI on your farm. No problem. Now, the trap to watch for there that we've already discovered is that whereas Natural England will tell the RPA that they give their consent to operations on triple SI land, they don't tell the RPA if it's not a problem in the first place. And we've had people stuck waiting for an agreement to be offered, and all that turned out was that the triangle hadn't been completed, and we needed to check. We needed to forward to the RPA the letter saying that wasn't a problem with the triple SI. So do check that that communication is complete between Natural England and the RPA, because you can't necessarily guarantee that it is. So that's one of the main lessons this evening. So we are going to do that. That's all fine. We'll move on. So great. We're eligible to apply for SFI. So that's the introductory bit over. The next bit I'll go through quite quickly. It can be a bit daunting when you first look at it. It's where you select which actions you want to do. Now, this isn't a last opportunity to select your actions. It is just a means of designing your own application template, so you haven't got pages and pages of actions to scroll through for each field. So it just allows you to select which ones you want to that you're mainly interested in, and discount the ones that you're not interested in. If you can't see the ones you want to select, then you need to go into this sort by box, and you can click all and you get the whole lot. I've already done these already to save time, and then you go through each of them and tick the ones you want. And I've ticked all the arable ones in this instance. Haven't ticked any of the margin one, the buffer strips here. Or you can just select selected, and that will just reduce that to the ones that you are interested in. So that's, and you can come back to this during or at the end of the application. If you've forgotten about an action and you want to add it in, you can come back, select it again, and then apply it to the field that you want to. So we'll move on from that to part 3, which is the main meat of the application. As I say, this is a real farm somewhere in England. So you'll find a map of the farm you're interested in on the top right, which is dynamic. If we click on that field there, it will select it out. This one on the left, it breaks it down, and then you can see what actions you select. Or you can just click on the link on the left-hand side, and it'll take you to that field or parcel the other way around. Okay, so if you want to work through the list on the left-hand side, in this instance, we're starting this small one, only barely a hectare. And in this one, on the right-hand side, you have all your actions. As you can see, it's good to have your options narrowed down so you don't have pages and pages of actions to scroll through. Because this is the land cover for this is permanent grassland, it's only got a few here and not the pages and pages of arable ones. For this one, we are going to go for low input grassland, but just to show you something to be aware of, I'm just going to reduce that to half a hectare, just to be on the safe side, but it will come back with a warning to say that this needs to be the full 0.45481. And this is because low input grassland is a whole cover option. So if your land cover isn't correct and you think it's too generous or not enough, then that's what you need to correct first before you apply the SFI. In this instance, we're going to assume that's okay. And another key point about this is bottom right-hand corner, you've got the green button, update your SFI actions. If you don't tick that, no matter how many boxes or decimals you add in up here, if you don't press the update button, it won't save them, it won't apply them to your application. So it's very important as you go along to keep clicking that, and it'll add it to your application so you don't lose it. So remember to keep updating as you go along. So that's low input grassland. Just a point on low input grassland, unlike the GS2 low input grassland under mid-tier countryside stewardship, low input LIG1 under SFI does allow supplementary feeding and a modest amount of fertilizer to be applied, equivalent to that will be found in 12 tons of farmyard manure per hectare. So quite a concession there on top of what used to be the countryside stewardship low input grassland, so it is slightly better. But it is, as you see, in a whole cover option, just be aware of that. So that's that particular field. We're going to move on to another one. So this time we're going to use the map. So we're going with that large one there, which breaks down, that's an arable field. Just moving on from low input grassland, on this field, there's no not much permanent pasture in this field. You can see the breakdown on the left-hand side of what the last BPS application was, of the different land uses. Because it's only a small bit of permanent grassland and it's trapped between a track and the edge of the field, one of those annoying bits that they've mapped out as no longer arable but grassland. This is an opportunity. This is where I'm going to use the IGL1 option, which is take grass and fill corners of blocks out of management. So you may have an arable field that's got a sort of salient on one side that's just grassland, that's been grassland for too long, has moved from arable to permanent pasture after 5 years. This is an opportunity to get your own back and click for a higher rate of payment than the £151 a hectare for low input grassland, and get £333 per hectare for taking grassland and fill corners out of management. But I need to be careful I don't put the whole 24 hectares in, because that isn't all permanent pasture. It can't be more than the 0.163 that's in the land use on the left-hand side. So I'm going to put in 0.16, but this is a part land cover option, so I don't have to put in the whole 0.163 of the land cover. I'll just taking it down a little bit just to be sure, and update that, and that should be accepted, which it is. If you want to apply any desk-based actions, in this case, the soil management plan, you need to click on SAM1, which is on the second row of options here. And again, update as you go along, and that will apply that field to your soil management plan. So that's that particular field. Now, getting a little bit more detailed and technical, I'm going to select this small field, about 5 hectares up there. This is the stewardship field for this particular farm, and it's already in countryside stewardship. If you look on the left-hand side on the breakdown of the land use, it's got 3 hectares of Group 1, which is the represents the winter bird food in this field already, countryside stewardship winter bird food, and then it's got 1 hectare of flower and nectar mix under countryside stewardship as well. But sustainable farming incentive does allow you to overlay options on top of existing countryside stewardship agreements. Now, I can't add another 3 hectares of winter bird food because there isn't room for it, but I could add another half a hectare because the field would accommodate that. Also, what I can do, and bearing in mind this is in countryside stewardship winter bird food and also flower and nectar mix. If I can find it, if you see at the top on the right hand side, you've got IPM4, no use of insecticide. Now, there's a slight anomaly here between SFI and countryside stewardship, is that you can apply no insecticide option under SFI to countryside stewardship arable options, nearly all of them, in fact, 1, 2, 4, 5, 8, 9, 15, and 16. So I can, whereas in SFI, I can only apply no use of insecticide to winter bird food, which is AHL2. Because there's countryside stewardship winter bird food on this and flower and nectar mix, I can also apply it to the pollen and nectar mix as well. So there's a slight mismatch there between countryside stewardship and SFI, but we're going to take advantage of that in this instance and apply that across both options. Another point to note about the no insecticide use is it is whole field. It is boundary to boundary. If you've just got winter bird food or some other side crop that doesn't have insecticide on it in a corner, but you've got a main crop of potatoes in the middle of the field, which obviously you want to spray with insecticide or oilseed rape or something like that, you can't just do the no insecticide on the bit in the corner. It needs to be a crop that will accept, you're not going to spray insecticide on at all across the whole field. In this instance, there are existing stewardship options. So we're going to update that and take advantage of that anomaly. So that's what I wanted to say about the no insecticide option. If, say, that field didn't have anything in it and I was going to put in 4.5 hectares of winter bird food under SFI, which is AHL2 there, which pays £853 a hectare, I can still top that up, if that's all that's in there, with the no insecticide option, which is another £45 a hectare. So you're getting nearly £900 a hectare just for winter bird food, which you don't use insecticide on anyway. So that's quite a lot of money, even considering the costs of establishing the winter bird food. So something to bear in mind. So we're going to move on from that one. Again, I'm going to use the map to select this particular field because this is what's happening in this one. In this field, what the farmer is deciding to do is they're fed up. The winter beans failed last year, didn't pod, plenty of foliage, no podding. So what we're going to do this time to sort of hedge the risks is to put the NUM3 legume fallow in that field, and that will be 9.5 hectares that will rotate round the farm like a rotational crop. That will pay £593 a hectare. There's the cost of the seed, the cost of getting it in, but it's still competitive to and less risky than a lesser break crop that might fail. So that's how they're going to de-risk that particular hazard. On the subject of legume fallow, some people might say, well, it doesn't pay as much as AHL1, the pollen and nectar mix at the top there, which is £739 a hectare. But this is a current sort of argument that's up there at the moment. Can you sow AHL1 pollen and nectar mix now in the spring, and then rip it up in the autumn and put in first wheat, and then move the pollen and nectar mix somewhere else? Well, what I would say about this is my personal opinion, is that if you're using a proprietary pollen and nectar mix and you put it in now, or by April or May, it will grow, hopefully. But the idea is that with the pollen nectar mix is you cut it in the first summer to flower in the second summer. That's how these mixes are designed, and the strains and varieties that it use. It is unlikely to achieve its flower delivery, which is the whole point of the action, in the first summer, is my view. Therefore, in this instance, they're going for the legume fallow. They're going to put a crop in this field, and then in the autumn, they're going to put in the NUM3 legume fallow, which used to be known as AB15 under countryside stewardship. And it's a different seed mix. It's designed for autumn sowing. And there is potential for that to deliver its action in 1 year. And there'll be some flowering in the first year. And it will also provide the nitrogen fixing as well, which is part of the action. Whereas the pollen and nectar mix is all about delivering flowers for food for birds and for nectar for insects. So that's my view. If I was going to move these options around annually, which you can do now, I would go for the legume fallow and drill it or establish it in the autumn. That's my piece on that particular hot topic. While we're on the subject of hot topics, you can also see there there's AHL3, which is grassy field corners and blocks, which used to be known as fallow field corners under ELS days, which they brought back into SFI, which is jolly handy. Pays £590 a hectare for not doing very much. Some people are putting their whole farms down to this, or putting a significant amount of the farm down to this, because it's money for old rope. Yes, it is. However, I would caution you that the Treasury haven't made up their minds yet how they're going to treat some of these stewardship actions, and whether they are actually farming from a tax point of view. If you're just abandoning your farm to go back to nature and cutting it occasionally to get rid of woody growth, I think there'd be a question mark over that when it came to inheritance or looking at your income tax, whether you are actually trading, you're actually farming. I think it would be safer to go for something like pollen and nectar mix or winter bird food or legume fallow, because you are actually having to do something to the land to deliver the public goods. Again, that's my point of view. Other people may see it differently, or the Treasury may rule differently. They haven't made up their minds yet. So that's those particular knotty issues in passing. Let's move on to another field and deal with something else. Right, this field on the left-hand side, you'll find there's a red warning to say not all of the parcel has land uses declared against it. This is news to me because it wasn't there at the end of last year. It's something that happened in the mapping update over the winter. And what's the way of rectifying this, and I'm not going to do it now, is you go back to where you used to complete your basic payment scheme and go into the land use link and go to that well-known section where you say what crop is in which field. And you need to tinker with the relative land areas so that it comes to the total that they've now mapped it as. There'll probably be an yellow under declaration warning on that particular field. So you need to get rid of it, basically. And when you've saved that and come back to your SFI application, that warning will have gone. So that's why I chose that particular field. Let's try another. This one over in this top corner has got a scheduled monument in it, which you'll see from the layer intersections bit on the left-hand side. It's got historical, biodiversity, and triple SI. It's got the whole shooting match, but it has got a couple of scheduled monuments in there. So in theory, what should happen, but I think it does allow you to do it, I shouldn't be allowed to apply at SAM3 herbal lays to that field. Let's give it a go, see what happens. It does allow me to do that. But my understanding of the rules is that it shouldn't, because of the fear of the routing disturbing the archaeology underneath that particular field. So I think what would happen when that went for assessment, they'd say, come back, it'll come back from the RPA saying, sorry, you can't have SAM3 in that particular field. It's got a scheduled monument in it. So we won't do that on that field. What we'll do instead, just to show you how it works, is management of hedgerows. This is in meters, not hectares, and you get paid £13 per 100 meters. Now it's gone up a bit, so it's £13 per 100 meters per side. So if you've got control of both sides of the hedge, you can have £13 per 100 meters one side and £13 per 100 meters on the other side. So let's put in 100 just for the sake of it, save that. If you've got trees in those hedgerows, I haven't selected that particular option, it's HRW3, you can add a further £10 per 100 meters, but for both sides of the hedge, and you've got to have control on both sides of the hedge. So if it's a boundary field with your neighbour and you haven't got control of the other side of the field, you can't put the managed hedgerows with trees in it. But if it's in the middle of the field and you've got control of both sides, you can add another £10 per 100 meters for both sides of that particular hedge. So it doesn't sound like very much, but it does actually across the whole farm, can actually total up to a few thousand in a lot of instances. So it's worth doing. Getting near the end of the sort of field-based ones. In fact, I think I have come to the end of all the things that I need to raise on those particular issues. Just about on hedgerow management, unlike countryside stewardship, where hedgerow management was a sort of triennial management regime, with the sustainable farming incentive, it does allow cutting every 2 years, or cutting half your hedges each year, as it used to be with ELS. What you can't do is you can't cut your hedges, all of your hedges every year, or abandon your hedges altogether. You need to do either biennial or triennial management, or half or a third each year. So that's all I'll say about the main meat of the application process, putting actions to fields. But just a reminder, keep updating your selections or else they won't apply them to the application. So at this point, I'm going to go bottom left and return to the task list. We've done applying the SFI actions to the available land parcels. What we also need to look at is apply for agreement level SFI actions. Now, this is where you'll find your desk-based actions, as I call them, which is the integrated pest management, nutrient management, and soil management plans. And this is where you make the gross payment of £1,129 a year for the pest management plan, £652 a year for the nutrient management plan, and the £97 per agreement per year for the soil management plan. This is where you make it stick, basically. Don't worry about the numbers in the units boxes. Just one, it's binary, it's 1 or 0. If it's got 1 in it, that will apply it to your whole application. You'll get those sort of those whole application payments. As you recall, when we were going through each field, you also, if you want the soil management plan to apply per hectare, you get your £6. So you get your £6 per hectare. You need to keep clicking the SAM1 action box on it when you come to each field. You don't have to do every field, just the ones you want to do that to. Maybe you've got a lot of small fields, and carrying out an organic matter soil test on each small field is going to come to too much money like you want to bear, and you may just want to do the larger ones. Might make more economic sense. But that's where you make the sort of whole agreement actions stick. And David mentioned the management payment, which is now the maximum of £2,000 per year per agreement. If you've got an application, let's say you're already in countryside stewardship wall to wall, but you want to pick up the management payment, which may only be on offer this year, I would say get it while it's on offer rather than wait until later. It's my personal view. One way of making that happen is just to go for soil management and just click as many fields as totals the maximum 50 hectares to get your £40 a hectare or however they're going to work it. So that's if you're not interested in any other of the actions, you can at least go for soil management across the farm to get your sort of max out on your also get your soil payment, but also max out on your management payment per year. So we're going to update that and save that. And we're getting near to the end of my bit. Got down to the bottom, and last section 4, just to review things. It comes up with error message because I haven't validated it. So you go down, check each bit. You can go back into each section. I've called it Old MacDonald's Farm to protect the real identity, protect the guilty. And click validate, and hopefully that will allow it to process. If there's a problem with it, it won't be immediately obvious what's wrong, because the red exclamation mark in this instance is successful. Whoopee. Down the middle here, there'll be a very faint red exclamation mark against the section that's wrong. Now, if I'd ticked that we weren't going to, the triple SI wasn't a problem, that we weren't going to seek consent, when we came to validate it, it would come up with a red exclamation mark saying, I think you do need to seek consent from Natural England, even if you don't think you've got a triple SI on your land. So you can go back in to change that. Well, let's see where it goes now. Go back into that, and then you change it there, tick yes, which we've done already, and jobs are good. And again, it wants me to validate it again. And if you're happy with the application, I'll just validate that again. I won't submit it because I've got some work to do on this yet. And but what you do once it's validated, something to think about, is you tick the continue box, comes up with a warning saying you sure we want to submit this, and you submit it. And at some stage, the time frame is, if you, for example, this month, if you submitted it before the end of February, they have a month to offer it or to sort it out, and then you to start at the beginning of April. And then 3 months later, beginning of July, you'll get your first quarterly payment. And just so you're aware, in this instance, you see the figure there, the 7,153. That is the full amount for the 3-year period. So divide that by 3 to get your per annum payment, and obviously by another 4 if you want your quarterly payment. What isn't in that figure is the £2,000 management payment, which is per year, which you add on top of the annual figure. My final parting hazard point is that you need to accept the offer made to you, and they won't necessarily make this immediately obvious. It may be as subtle as a message in your RPA portal box. They won't going to email you or phone you up to say, could you accept your offer? You need to check your messages on the RPA portal regularly, or take notice of the warnings that they've sent you a new message. It's not just that they've moved your field boundary by a few inches. It is actually they're offering you a SFI agreement, and you need to go back into this part of the RPA portal and accept it, or else it won't start. We've already learnt that this year. So that's all I was going to say at this stage. I'm going to unshare my screen and hand back over to Marcus. Hopefully that's unshared. Marcus, is that right?
Just stop sharing at the bottom of your screen, I think.
Are we good?
While Charles is just going through that, I'll just quickly go through. Oh yeah, there you go. Just quickly go through the poll results. So, will you apply for SFI? Nearly 90% of you have said yes. So a high interest in SFI. And are you replacing any break crops with rotational actions? 26 of you said yes, and only 74% no. Again, largely dependent on your farming type and how you're looking to integrate that into your rotation. So we've had a number of questions coming in before this webinar tonight, and I can see plenty of you have been going through that and asking lots of questions tonight, which is brilliant. So we'll kick off to either of you, David or Charles. Should we be taking advantage of the offers available now or wait for further options as the scheme evolves?
Well, certainly every webinar, other webinar I've attended, the suggestion is take what's on offer at the moment and add the 24 stuff in as and when it becomes available. I mean, what happened in the 23 one was it first became available sort of late summer, but only to a few people. Then as they ironed out glitches and so on, it wasn't widely available till quite late in the year. So I think there's definitely a chance that might happen again. The only situation might be if there was a really high paying option under the new one, which was currently quite low or not available. You'd have to weigh up whether to go for what's there at the moment, or of course what you can do is go for an SFI on part of your area and then keep some of it out. So you could go for SFI 23 on the bits that you're happy with getting those payments, and then save the potential higher payments back for a separate one for SFI 24. So you could do that sort of mix and match. But yeah, the general rule is get what you can now, get in the scheme, and then add things later on. I don't think I've heard anybody not say that yet.
Yeah. Again, there's a lot of questions around higher tier and countryside stewardship and how the two will interact with one another. This question here, we're in higher tier options. Can we stack new capital options on top? Can we take part parcels out, e.g. by using an RLE1 form to split a field, put higher paying options in one side? Again, how does that interact with one another?
So I think on the higher tier options, it's quite difficult to. I think it'd be quite difficult to try and remove an existing action to replace it with a higher paying new action. That's normally quite tricky. You would certainly have to have a conversation with RPA about that, but normally that side of it would be quite tricky. In terms of capital, then yes, normally if you've already either done the capital in your original agreement or that date has expired, then yes, you can go ahead and get a standalone capital grant, apply for standalone capital as a separate thing, even if you're in an existing CS or higher HLS agreement.
Anything further, Charles, or?
Yeah, as you've seen in the application, there's ability to overlay additional SFI actions on top of countryside stewardship, whether it's high tier or mid tier. The countryside stewardship agreements and like the HLS are a contract with the government to deliver those things. So if you don't like it, you really need to bring it to an end. And they've been, in my experience, even with HLS, quite amenable to bringing those agreements to an end, but at their their term date, so to speak. So maybe the end of the calendar year, or the end of whenever the classic scheme was ending, and then go into SFI. But you can, if you're not already, as long as they're not paying for the same thing twice, they will allow an SFI action on top of CSS agreement.
Perfect. Do you need to update your hedgerow data with RPA ahead of applying for the hedgerow actions?
Thankfully not. Thankfully not. No. You've obviously, it's got to be there, and if it's inspected, it must be there. But no, thankfully, you don't have to go through the process of trying to get it all RLE1 and added onto the RPA system.
Excellent. Current SFI scheme requires you to be on BPS. We just applied for our first country mid-tier scheme. For those of us not on BPS due to new farm registration, when can we apply for SFI for the first time?
Apparently this summer, this new scheme will be available for those who haven't previously applied for BPS.
Yeah, I think that was again some of the ambiguity from DEFRA there, but yeah, I think that's to be announced. You mentioned, David, to be aware of water company offers. Why is this? If it's a private company, does this not count as double funding?
Well, very often it's instead of rather than addition to. So, in other words, if if you had a certain offer of winter cover crop through SFI, sometimes a water company one might better that. I think in the past occasionally people have managed to get both, but normally the rules are different on them. So it's probably more of a case of comparing one with the other rather than necessarily trying to get both.
Yeah. If you are the field owner and have tenants now and then, e.g. for sheep grazing, is that okay for SFI?
So that when you say tenants, that's just on a sort of you can graze my land but not formal tenancy. That would be okay. You can't, a landlord can't claim it if the tenant is a full tenant, either AHA or FBT. But if it's just a license or allowing them to graze a few sheep on it, then yes, the landlord will be able to claim in that situation.
You just need to be careful. You just need to be careful with what they're actually going to do during the season. That they're not going to scalp the grass. If it's in a low input grass, they're going to scalp it and spread it with 250 kilos of nitrogen. It's going to bring your agreement unstuck.
Yeah, I mean, quite often in a license now, you would have often a section in there explaining the stewardship and what each field that they might be doing their grazing on, what option it's in, and the restrictions and so on, so that both parties understand the restrictions on each field.
Yeah. So conscious of time here, trying to rattle through a couple more. What happens if a mistake is made on the application? I assume that's post-submission.
You need to withdraw it and start again. We haven't experienced it yet, but there may be some negotiation with the RPA, but generally what you apply is what you get. It's designed to be a streamlined service.
Yeah.
I think, thankfully, I haven't been really in that position yet, but I think another colleague said yes, when he's come across that, the only way of doing it up until now has been to withdraw and reapply.
The RPA have said it doesn't happen yet, but if you want to add things in or you have second thoughts and want to do something additional, you can add more actions. At the moment, that will create an additional SFI agreement for which you won't get another management payment, by the way. But I think come the summer, the aim is that you actually add actions to an existing agreement. But I'd like to see it happen. They don't have a great reputation. They don't have a great track record when it comes to IT. Perhaps we'll leave that one there.
No, I think hopefully the application process will be a lot more harmonised as we go forward. Just probably one last question before we wrap up. I appreciate we've not been able to get through each one of them, but just conscious of time. If you have submitted a question and we have not answered it, we will get back to you after this webinar. If you are not able to complete the 3 years due to unforeseen circumstances, what will the consequences be?
We don't know for sure at the moment, but it is a 3-year agreement, a 3-year contract with the government to deliver those goods. My understanding is that if it's force majeure, you die and there's no one else to take it on, then that'll be they'll just bring it to an end. But if you just grow tired of it and want to go back to wall-to-wall wheat rather than doing winter bird food or fallow areas, that's your choice, and you may have to pay the money back that you've been paid, but we haven't tested that water yet.
No, I think all those things are yet to be seen. I mean, I suppose there's a bit of a precedent with stewardship in that normally unless you've got a very good reason they want you to keep going with it to the end of the agreement. So I would certainly be very wary. If you were thinking of doing that, you'd have to take advice and speak to RPA before you just literally cancel it and then find out what the penalties are afterwards. You'd certainly want to, be forewarned on what was going to happen there.
Yeah, I think just to add in on that, I think crucially they've said that there is, although you may be redacted payments, there won't be a penalty like in schemes gone by. So it's just worth noting that. Okay, thank you both. I will hand over to Keith to wrap us up for this evening.
Okay, thank you, Marcus. I'd just like to thank all our speakers this evening for their presentations. I hope you found it informative and useful. Just to explain where Lawrence School can help you going forward. We're going to be running another series of webinars in autumn 2024. So if you're interested in actually being invited to those webinars, please send your details through to Newmarket at Lawrence School. We are doing one-to-one farm visits. It's not just for SFI applications, but we do cover other issues affecting farm resilience. And some of the issues we've been involved with so far with the scheme have been quite wide-ranging. And we're able to offer these one-to-one farm visits probably up until about February 2025. So if you have any issues, please get in contact with us. I'd just like to emphasise there are grant opportunities underneath this transition scheme. And just please be aware of those. And if you want to get on a database with us for us to notify you of those opportunities, then please contact us. We did do a webinar on carbon audits last week. So if any of you did miss that and you'd like to watch it, you can watch it up on the catch up afterwards. Just basically apply your farm name, business and SBI number, and you can link in on that. Again, if you didn't get everything, because I know Charles Navy went through an awful lot today and you want to re-watch it again, you can re-watch it through catch up again after this webinar has finished. I hope you found the whole thing an evening interesting. We try to keep it sharp and quick. If you have any issues, please do not hesitate to contact us. And as I said, we're there to help. And the best place to contact us is newmarket@lawrenceschool.com. So have a good evening and thank you for attending. Good night.